Seriously? Should we
Yes.
more?
I'm gonna start looking at the gas.
Yeah, in my,
That'd be great.
in my side of the chamber.
Yes,
From up above.
Once a week would help warm half a gas.
Look at that, my
See, now-
There's a new budget proposal.
You have a panic button, you've got a gas
Spring
button.
on it. Thank you, by the way, for my lunch.
So they're all gone in about 2 hours.
Wonderful.
I was just because he's really helping our,
So good.
really helping our
I
waste.
savored every bite of
Yes,
it.
probably.
Oh, do I have a-
Yeah. Catherine, will you hand me that folder right there? Yes, sir.
You can sit in the hot seat.
Call a meeting order
We can write
403.
another seat down there if you'd like. So do you have enough space?
I do, I'm fine.
Okay. So, Catherine, do you want to move here so that there's a little bit?
Blocking
Oh,
your
no,
way
never
here.
mind, that's fine. It's just this. Okay.
I wanna get in your way.
Oh, I missed it, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Do the detailed, do the detailed one?
You want us to sign it?
All it added was
The announcement?
the announcement about,
And then the order you can help us with.
the order, yeah, the order Catherine will have with her.
Perfect, okay.
I called a meeting order at 403. We will be going to executive session to discuss call firefighter and
Full-time hire.
full-time firefighter's contract. And we will go into executive session since an opening meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the town, and the chair so declares. And the board will not return to open session following the executive session. One other word is that I have to blow out of here at 5:15, so it'll be in the hands of you three capable gents to carry on, and I'm sure that that'll be okay. I'm sure you can handle it. First item of business is the police contract.
Budget.
Oh,
Oh, I didn't mean contract, I meant budget. Okay.
Kelly, we need the recording of this, please.
Yes, we are recording it, our secretary is recording the meeting, and is there anyone else that wants to record the meeting?
Get it to you.
I do.
Okay,
But if you wanna,
Mr. Gant as well, Sue.
just give it to them, so they just look up. However you wanna do it.
okay, chief, you're up.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Couple issues up front. First and foremost, you know I'm winding down in my career, and I have Detective Sergeant Haywood, soon to be captain, working with me closely on the budget this year, so we get some experience in the process. There's a couple of issues have come up since the initial submission of this budget. Of course, we had an unanticipated retirement on Steve Ware. Because of that, we have to hire a new officer and ultimately send them to the police academy. So you'll see those numbers reflected as we progress throughout the budget. But we also intend to appoint 3 reserve officers on a January 8th meeting that's already scheduled for the board. And with that, we anticipated a reduction in some of the overtime costs associated with that, because those officers would be working as opposed to full-time personnel. So you'll see some changes in that line, in a reduction. I do have copies of this, but if you do not want to have it submitted, or I'll submit it to Catherine at a later date, just explain how you want any changes submitted to the budget, and we'll do so. So I guess we'll address the issues for the changes or any increases, and future Captain Haywood can explain that.
We're gonna go off the old one that we just.
No, the budget the budget we've submitted originally.
Okay.
Just to clarify, the budget you submitted originally, which I want to make sure we're looking at the right one.
It's the one that everyone has in their packet. They
Everyone
don't right now,
has
but
it, yeah, we haven't.
And
we
this
haven't
reflects
done anything.
the notice from Officer Ware that he is retiring
Correct.
Correct.
with all necessary contractual related expenses
Right.
as contractually required.
Right.
Okay.
The only difference between that and what we're submitting is, we anticipate a little bit more reserve coverage in filling those shifts that are required to be filled.
So however you wanna make the adjustment, we'll give you a number. If you wanna change that and reduce it yourself, that's fine. We just wanted to bring it to your attention that we were aware of that, and we certainly didn't want to put any money in that we didn't need to put in.
Okay, as we're looking at this right now, does this meet the guidelines set by the FinCom? Is it a zero? Is it
Yes.
a level funded other budget?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the only real impact is with regard to personnel, wages?
Yep. All contractual and the addition of the overtime for the new officer. Everything else is contractual.
Okay, and just to be clear for the board's sake, there is no final CBA right now in effect for the police officers. That's still under negotiation.
That's
So
correct.
this budget assumes a 0% increase in the wages related to any potential contractual negotiation agreement.
Right, exactly.
Right, okay, and that would come at a later point once we get a contract signed, sealed, and delivered, and then at that point, we would present an updated revised budget to both the board, well, first to the town accountant, to the board, and also to the FinCom. So that would come as soon as there's any negotiation or settlement with the police officer union.
And so just to confirm, the one that we're looking at is dated December 13th, 2017, and that's the same one that everybody's looking at.
Yes.
Yes.
That's correct.
And you'll see that the bottom line is the same number as what occurs up here under police department salary and wages. That confirms that in fact it is a balanced budget, except for contract issues.
Right.
All right, the floor is yours if you wanted to explain any of the attached supplemental requests.
Sure, basically, we're gonna go through the wage aspects of it right now. So, the regular wages, the difference that you're seeing, the 11,344, has to do with what we agreed upon last year as far as the captain's position is concerned.
We'll start with mine first.
Well,
What's 11,344? I'm sorry.
No, we're gonna start with the first.
Oh, you're
line.
talking about dollars, that's what you're talking
Yeah,
about
let's,
accounts.
we'll
Okay.
we'll address we'll address
There it
the
is.
column for fiscal year 19 increases and decreases. That's the easiest way to outline everything. And we'll start with the police chief increase of 12,185. That's contractual, of course, as we indicated before. You can just take it from there. Go down to 11,334, 344,
the 11,344.
regular officer wages.
So, basically, that increase is partly because of the captain's position that was going on that was agreed upon last year, and also partly because Sergeant Bonfanti has reached, through his probationary period, and will be getting an increase according to the contract.
That probation is a 6-month period, if I remember correctly.
No, it's a year.
It's 1 year?
The next line that you're gonna see, the 122979, for police administrative assistant.
Just so I knew that, that's Catherine.
That's Catherine.
Okay, yep.
And that's just reflecting the 2% increase that she'll be getting.
Off of the grid,
across the board.
off of the grid.
Yeah.
I see.
We deducted some of the wages out of the clerical, the 445 difference. Basically, we took a look at that clerical position and made sure that we were going to be more effective with it. So the number that you see is more of an actual figure of what we're trying to accomplish with that clerical position.
Also, the wages are less than what Sandy's was.
Right.
Because the person is at a different level
It is a
of
new
wages.
employee.
Okay. And this is the one that relates much to what's happening up in RACC.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of her responsibilities are related to the RECC as well as internal.
Because of issues with the software at the RECC.
Related to some issues, yes, that's
Right.
correct.
Not totally though.
How much, half of it, a third of it?
Well, I'm gonna say roughly a third of it now. Okay, because we're starting to get mandated by other entities to get information, things along that line, that was kind of getting into it. Are you all set with
Yep,
that?
yeah, I think so.
Okay, the 116 on the matrons and the keepers of the lockup is a 2% increase in there also for wages. We're trying to keep it along that line.
So again, the grid, essentially.
Yep.
The overtime regarding the police overtime. Oh,
44,880.
for the new one?
$44,880 of that is adjusted for the academy overtime necessary that would be required. It's contractual as to the first 6 weeks must be given to full-time overtime police personnel, and then the remaining time it's on a 50-50 ratio. That's the high-end adjustment of $44,880, assuming that the reserve officers don't work as much.
No,
That's an area of the budget which we can reduce by $9,300
Oh, no, right, our new submission one?
by us putting on, that's correct, by us putting on the new reserve officers. We anticipate they'll be working, so we should be able to cut that $9,300 if the board so chooses.
from 6,400 roughly to 5,400, from 64,000 to 54,000.
That's
roughly.
correct.
Okay, but let me just understand that the 44 for the academy, often the academy has to do with new people coming in. So this reflects the fact that we have to hire somebody new?
Right, to replace.
To replace Officer Wynn.
And it's possible, it's possible that the person we find to hire has already gone to the academy, depending upon where we would hire the person from.
No, we have found most of our officers we've taken from within our internal program of auxiliary officers, and they become special police officers and then ultimately reserve officers. From that program, we find out who is definitely fit, the most accurate fit for the department, and we feel that we train them in our processes and our field training programs. What has happened in the past, we've saved some money because those officers have chosen to go to the academy on their own as a self-sponsor. Unfortunately, the openings for those positions for civilians to become self-sponsored have been very limited in the academies, and they haven't been able to attend. We had 3 officers try to apply this last academy, and they were denied because the civil service list has come out. A lot of departments are filling openings, and they take hires from within the department first before they'll take self-sponsorship. So we were able to lock in a slot in June for the academy.
Yeah.
So, but, we would hire the person as soon as we could, probably sometime in January. And they would work on a waiver and then go to the academy in June.
Could I ask a clarifying question? If in a perfect world there was no turnover or retirements, would you say that this $44,000 is a one-time expense?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's very possible that this time next year, we could see a budget that's $49,000, well, wouldn't include this expense, assuming nobody retires between this year
That's correct.
and next year.
Yeah, we used to have a line in this years ago that used to have academy overtime. I've discussed this with a few people about putting it back in the budget. I don't know why it was removed at some point, I guess because we didn't use it for a few years. But that was a line we did have in there,
Right.
specifically justifying that overtime.
Okay.
So,
I just think in terms of framing it to the FinCom, they need to fully understand that this isn't something that is an annual recurring expense, that it is directly related to retirements in the department, and if we can plan for those ahead of time, we're in a good situation to be able to have the time to plan for that. If it happened during the year, we'd be looking at a reserve fund transfer
That's correct.
situation. So the fact that we can deal with this early on, is actually something we can at least plan for. But the good news is that assuming we have a stable workforce with a lot of new recruits, that hopefully this will be a one-time cost or something that's infrequent. But it does sort of throw some numbers out of whack if you're just strictly looking at the bottom line. We want them to be aware that this budget represents, even though it's within guidelines, it also represents about $45,000 that's strictly related to the retirement of one officer and getting that position filled for the long term.
Right back with it.
A question, that $64,000 sounds to me like it is partially to cover the cost of the academy.
Yes.
Yes.
And the rest of it is to cover overtime?
Not generally overtime. What we did was we reallocated, you'll see a line, the next line in place at the 19,294. We reallocated those monies so to come more in line with what's actually happening. We're currently having issues with our reserve officers working, and as opposed to the allotted 50-50 split that we generally do. We're looking more at a 75-25 or an 80-20 split, because the shifts just aren't being filled.
Okay.
So those lines, the reserve officer
Yeah.
overtime,
Yeah.
monies, well, in a perfect world, the numbers would be consistent, but based on who works and when works. If they don't work, the overtime goes up for full-timers. If reserves work more.
Yeah.
So it's like a fluctuating scale, and it's hard
Yeah.
to predict exactly
Yeah.
each year how that's gonna play out. So that 19 grand will just move into the full-time overtime, because it is allocated in some respects into that overtime at some point throughout the year. So we just try to bring it more cost appropriately, I guess, in the numbers.
And in line with what is actually going on. Any other
So,
questions?
yeah,
Matt?
we just come back then to the suggestion you made, Chief, that we did have a line item for this thing that goes on and off, meaning the academy. Would it be appropriate to get that line item back into this budget so that it can be seen broken out better?
It would-
Again, especially for next year,
Well,
thinking
yeah.
ahead.
So this actually extends back to FY 2012, so at this point it would be considered a new line item. So it could, but it'd have to go on the B3 form, just to fit the format of how we've been doing it.
What does everyone think?
Well, it'd be worthwhile to break it out, I would think, because the academy costs something, and you gotta fill in behind that with some overtime pay.
And then next year it goes away, so it's easier to
Yeah.
track the
Yeah.
item, right?
What does it cost to send a guy to the academy? 40?
Well, in worst case scenario, it'd be 44,880,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
but as we
That's
looked
what-
at it, we could, like I said, we cut it about $9,300.
Yeah, well, when you said 44,880, I assumed that was the cost of worst-case situation.
That's
not
correct.
The cost of the academy, okay.
Yeah, well, we envision these new reserve officers to be, working more. That will definitely reduce the costs associated with that.
Yeah, okay.
And the last two that we have to discuss is the assigned duty that will be going to zero. We'll be cutting that out because I will be covering for the chief if he's not. That's part of the responsibilities of the new position.
That's part of a captain's responsibility,
Yes.
you're saying? And the specialty pay?
The specialty pay for the -$600 is
Yeah.
just accounted for one of the positions that was currently lost with Steve retiring.
Okay, okay.
So on the other budget, it's balanced from what the FinCom's recommendation was. We just reallocated some funds. Carry through lower allocations.
We found when we did an analysis on the electricity that was for the past years, it was less than what we had budgeted, so we took some of that money and reallocated it. I'll just, in simple terms, we can say that, well, the police telephone communications and computer line item,
Which line item?
Give me a number.
okay, it is,
53,400,
yeah, 53,400.
halfway down.
There it is, okay.
Okay. That, we find that we're currently running close to or over, and we're adding new things to our technology. For so long, we've kind of neglected the technology aspect of it, but we're trying to accomplish that. Along with that, what we did receive was an additional cost from the rec center regarding the air cards in our computers that we have to assume that cost. They no longer are funding that, and that's gonna offset some of that.
So this is essentially equipment, physical equipment
Well,
that's what that item is.
This was really the phone line bills that
Oh, the phone line,
the
no,
rec
it
was
isn't.
paying for our mobile data terminals, that we are now assuming they put that bill on us now.
Are you talking for the rec center or this
This-
line?
No, that
This one,
particular item, the
2,000.
2,000.
Right. This line is not the equipment aspect of it.
It's not, it's the,
Right.
it's
Fees
the
associated.
communication, lease of, rental of the line or the
Correct.
fees.
That fees
Again,
Verizon
that
charges.
the rep had said before. Why
Some-
did they pass it back to us?
Because they have to cut their budget, so they stuck it on us. And we were very fortunate, I think we were the only town that had, this was only a $2,000 hit.
Yeah.
These other towns had considerable amount of monies associated with it. We were very fortunate when we broke off to the rec that we were cautious in how we did it with our phone lines and everything else.
Mhm.
So we, $2,000 is
Mhm.
the minimal amount of money that they pushed back on us. But because they had to make budget cuts up at the rec, they pushed all these monies back to the towns.
The other side of that, though, is that there was an acknowledgement that some of the costs that were originally taken on by the rec center weren't necessarily appropriate for the rec center as a whole. And therefore, it was disproportionately unfavorable for, so we were all basically covering the costs for, say, another town that had $40,000 worth of expenses going to the rec. So there was a discussion about what charges were appropriate to be under the rec and continue under the rec, and which one should be going back to the appropriate town. So we're just fortunate that we're only absorbing $2,000 as opposed to a $40,000 number. But the financial advisory committee felt that that was fair and equitable for all of the members of the rec. So that's why that was agreed to, but that explains why it's on this list and you haven't seen it before. We are also fortunate that our per capita rate of $16.26 per person has not changed in the 5 years we've been members of the rec. So
So
that
do we
needs
know
to be
that that's the
considered
case?
for offset.
Is that true for the coming year?
As of right now, that's the indication that has, I haven't received any notification that that will change in the budget discussion will happen next month. So we're waiting for the sheriff's department to present a budget to
Okay.
the group for
So
discussion.
we think it'll be the same, but we're waiting to.
We think it's going
finalize
to
it.
be the same. In any case, that would have to be worked, because it's an appropriation on the cherry sheet. You wouldn't even be looking at that on this sheet. I just wanted to make sure that people are aware that the offset of that expense is based on the equity related to the rec center. So we're seeing it new here, but with all the money that we have saved from the rec center, you can be assured that even though we're paying an extra $2,000 now, we've also had 5 years of savings during the time that we've been a part of the rec.
Just a question, a request. As soon as we get something from the rec center for what will actually be, and I think that's the first week of February or something like that, to do to have the budget for it. If it's any different than the 1626, would you make sure the board knows?
Of course,
Thank you.
that's my job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now we're to the, if we get into the 260, the police water bill, we increase that 260. Along with a slight increase on the water costs, we also find that our plumbing at the police station is something that has to be addressed in the future. right now, we had some plumbing issues, things along that line that we're trying to rectify. And that's why you're gonna see a little bit of an increase into that.
But this is literally our water bill, is it not?
Not only that, but well, yes, it is, but it's also because we're having problems.
It's also maintenance.
Right. Well, no, Jim, it's
This
the
is
water
just a water
bill.
bill.
It's the
It's
water
caused
bill,
by the-
okay.
By the, you know, a lot of it's caused by the age of the building, things along that line.
Could I ask a question about the
It
electricity?
doesn't make sense.
What were you assuming, are you just basing your increase or decrease of 2,000 based on the fact that you're looking at current year bills over the
Over the last few years.
experience?
Right.
Correct.
Would it be safe to assume that if rates go up, if electricity goes up, that you still have enough funding in your budget to cover your electricity costs for the department?
Well, one of the issues that we've replaced the air conditioning system to a more efficient system. So we anticipate some savings in that, because the existing system was, 30 years old.
Right.
And so we think that we should be adequately supported with the monies that we have in there. Unless you see a dramatic increase in electricity rates, then we may have an issue. But, you know, we tried to live within the means of the FinCom recommendations, and we figured, you know, we had that area we could possibly reduce.
Yeah, I would say to the board that we definitely need to look at the cost or of the assumptions and our projections for our utilities, because I'm hearing also that the rates will be going up. And so some departments may have an assumption that they go up, some may keep it level, and in this case, it's going down. But I just don't want there to be confusion. We probably need a further discussion on the source by which we're making recommendations within individual budgets.
Seems like we might want to standardize that.
Well, exactly.
Well, we could give them
We
the
could.
guidelines as to
But
what we want them to do.
it's still possible that even though your budget for all of the townwide buildings has made an assumption that we need to go up, it's still very possible that the police station will go down because they're sufficiently funded, and the assumption is that they've made cost-saving measures that it will go down. So I just wanted to make that clear, even though it's a kind of a confusing point, but certainly something we need to discuss further. But it's gonna be more of an impact on the townwide side versus the police department side. I think that this is a safe assumption for us to make at this point, so we can get this budget moving.
So you went back to the electrical one. Since you went back, we could just follow through.
Sure.
For those listening, so to speak, the audience here, we have 2 years of actuals for any one of these line items, so it's not a whole lot of history. But in the case of the electrical, it's 10,700 3 years ago, let me say 2 years ago, and it was 14,000 1 year ago. So it seems a little odd then that we're gonna take it down to 13,500. First of all, I don't know why it fluctuates from 10 or 11,000 to 14,000 between 2 years. But secondly, if it was 14 in the most recent actual, unless we have a
The
lot.
most recent is in FY 17, so that's under expenses, which is 8600.
Oh, you do have some, I'm sorry. Whoop.
And they seem to indicate that that may have been due to a change in the air conditioner.
Right.
In other improvements in the roofing and the envelope, the building
So it's
envelope.
basically, the usage has gone down regardless of whether the rates have gone up.
Correct.
That's
The
right.
usage has gone
Correct.
down, and the presumption is that net effect is a reduction
And
in the
that-
cost.
And that's a big reduction, but air conditioners cost a lot of money to run,
Most
I know
expensive
that.
thing you have, they go.
And if
Right,
you
right.
got a new one, good,
And,
good, that's good.
The point being that the most recent was 8,600 actual in FY 17, and so we've taken it to 13,500, which is, as you point out, more, Kelly, good. And so we have good coverage there, thank you. But now on the water, again on the water, the history on that was 400, 400, and then it went to 760, and we're taking it to 1,000. It just seems like a whole lot. We know that the water bills are going up because the plant's coming online. They've actually gone up before the plant came online, but it's just a 30% increase, so to speak. Just seems like a whole lot.
No, it does seem like a whole lot, but what we're dealing with is a building that was built in the 30s, and we're inevitably getting hit with leaks throughout that.
Leaks.
Right, that.
Oh, this is,
Okay.
this is increased usage because of water leaks in the
Right.
plumbing.
Because of leaks, it's not usage, excuse me, leaks are not usage.
Yeah, we've
Well-
Okay, got it.
A lot of
It's
plumbers
leaks.
have been in there.
According to the water
Leaks.
department, it's usage.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it, got it.
So they tell us.
All right,
They don't care what you
That's
do.
right.
Balls or
Drip it into the
Okay.
walls.
Good,
Yeah, right,
good,
yeah,
good,
no
good.
problem.
Next.
So, where are we down to? Medical testing, which is 5320. We reallocated that money to 53210, which is a police academy fee. The reason being is the medical testing is basically in addition to the fee it costs to go to the police academy. So we just combine those two line items. 53200, the police meeting.
Supplies, huh?
That's it's just,
Well,
it's,
meeting and conferences and licenses.
right, it's
Yeah.
just adjusting that, getting it more in line with what the actual figures are. Starting to cross.
Avis machine, it's new for the department, so that'll be another cost. Is that this for the $1,000? Is it $1,000, do you see that as recurring expense or like a one-time expense for supplies, or just have to wait and see?
Yeah, we have to see how it
Right.
reflects in the future, but we try to bring that line more into what we
Oh, I'm
actually.
sorry.
Actual,
I was going-
the actual for 2000, for FY 17 was 7,000, and you're coming in at 6,400, so it's even less than the most recent full year, is what you're saying, right?
Mhm.
But the previous years were 56 and 5,900, so 6,400, it's within the category. Thank you.
5501, are we all set with that line?
I've heard enough, quite frankly. I mean, you've balanced your numbers here to make it come out zero funding. And I've got to assume that you guys have a better feeling on where these numbers are than I do, so. I'm not gonna take you to task over on each individual number, because we're not talking about a heck of a lot of money, and I'm not running the department, so.
Well, the question in part might come down to, though, the police building maintenance. It's at 15,000 now. What is this plumbing thing doing? I mean, obviously, $200 for water is not a big deal compared to 15,000 for maintenance, but I guess we have to deal with it. Well, is the maintenance enough?
We had a plumbing leak on the third floor on one of the toilets that was leaking, increasing water usage. But it also dripped down into an area into the second floor that caused some damage to the ceilings that we had to repair. And in speaking to the plumber that came in, he thought at first the cast iron plumbing drain pipe had cracked. And that's what his concern was. It turned out it wasn't the case, it was a seal around the actual toilet that was leaking. But in reviewing that, he was looking at the pipes and the cast iron pipes and made a recommendation that said basically, you better start putting some money away because this is gonna cost a lot of money when these pipes start to go. And I think, and I already just expressed that to the town administrator, that there's something in the future that we're gonna have to look at, because this building is, the original piping in this building is 80-something years old, right? So, you know, you're talking cast iron pipes that when they split vertically, he says, they don't split sideways, they split vertically. And when they go, the way, that building's built like a bomb shelter, so they're gonna have to tear out some walls and stuff to get to replace those pipes. So it's, hopefully it never happens, hopefully it lasts another 70 or 80 years, but we have to understand that without going poking around into that building, it could get very expensive at some point to replace those pipes.
We should recognize that that building needs a hell of a lot more work than we're just talking about right here, okay? Because it's, like you said, it's 80 years old. To come up with a number that's gonna take care of that is
No, that's different.
a shot in the dark.
Well, that's a capital item.
Of course
So,
it is.
I understand.
Yeah, I'd also like to just put a marker in that it may be a shot in the dark, it may be 3 or 4 or 5 years out and so on, but I think we should find some way to make an effort to get an estimate, at least a broad estimate, so that we have an idea whether we're gonna be looking at 50,000, 150,000, 350,000 to do the work that may be necessary. And I think the fee for a consultant to provide that kind of information would be well returned to be able to plan effectively.
You might already have some, along that line, you might already have some numbers based on that capital plan that was done 2 or 3 years
Well,
ago.
we were just, I was talking with the chief about that very thing, and we agreed that that would be in the best interest for us, at least to know and identify it and put it somewhere so that people don't lose sight of the fact that that's definitely on the horizon.
But I guess I would argue that rather than try and somehow fit that into the police budget, my own feeling is that there ought to be a consultant who looks at all the town buildings and gives a report, health report, if you will, on all of them. Some of them will require more, some will require less or for a lot further out, but without having that kind of information, you know, it's very difficult to think about what maintenance is actually gonna cost us.
Well, that was done. And you paid for a study to do that in FY14.
Yep.
And we've got it,
Dates and so
Yeah,
on.
we paid
every
$50,000
building,
for a study.
every
Okay.
building,
And
with
every building was
I've seen that
reviewed.
urgency
And
and
I
all
think-
that, and we should get him a copy of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, if you need a copy, Joe.
Sure,
And
yeah.
then, well, the first thing we
Won't
want to do is
embarrass
see if
myself by
that
saying
does include the
anything.
plumbing.
Well,
They
that's
already
right. We
include
should-
that.
I'll keep you on the
Need to
table.
go
Yeah, we
back.
Okay.
I have one item for it, but, back in the olden days, when the most time-consuming and controversial issues each budget cycle was police vehicles. And I personally think so much time was good that we finally, years later, or years through it, came up with a really good approach. And I think in a way, it's almost there's a little over-dramatization, it's almost a model approach that we actually found a way each year, we keep it going with a, in my opinion, a reasonable expenditure each year, so we don't end up with these years with huge expenditures. And obviously, I'm sure you guys would agree, it's a critical safety issue in the department. So, can we just take a minute and just clarify and remind people how we go about it? So it's one vehicle a year?
Historically, when I came on board and for the first few years, it was one car, two cars, one car, two cars.
Yeah.
And the last 2 times of the 2 cars, we only purchased one. We were able to do that because we have the replacement value when there's accidents on the vehicles, and we were able to replace the cars at a fortunate time through the insurance and not through the capital planning process. So we actually saved roughly buying 2 cars through that process over the last few years. So that's a plus. Ford had transitioned from their Crown Victoria model into the Explorer SUVs, which we've now switched our whole fleet over to. The last car that we'd be replacing this year, we'd be coming and asking for 1 car. Actually replaces all the older equipment to modernize it and standardize it with all the existing equipment in our SUVs. So every single car would be standardized exactly the same and replaceable exactly the same. So this will be the last car to do that. And by doing that, the next year's car is gonna cost less because the equipment is all standardized. Instead of buying new stuff here or replacing this, it can be transferred over and we save a considerable amount of
Light
money.
bars and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, and not have to purchase thousands of dollars worth of new equipment. That's where the cost savings come in by doing that and standardizing your equipment. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at least 1 car this year and 1 car next year.
And we're purchasing them?
We've purchased for quite a few years now.
And
So we keep the cars.
Almost done, just give me. And in both your opinions, the system's working?
It does.
For us, it's a perfect system.
This will be a 6-year-old car that'll be replaced this year with it's over 80, almost 85,000 miles now. It'll probably have over 100,000 by the time we're ready to do it in July. So you're getting 6 years out of a car, over 100,000 miles. That's just driven miles. I mean, based on the idling.
You know, we did another analysis of it prior to this budget session. And what we're finding is, well, what I found is the idling time is worse than the actual odometer reading that you
Yeah.
see on a car. And so compared to our idling time is gonna add significant mileage and wear and tear on the motors. The other thing that, with the way that this system is in place, we're getting rid of the cars when that 100,000-mile warranty is no longer in
Yeah.
effect. And that'll become a cost to the town too, of replacing all these things. They're driven hard, even though they're built a little bit better. But after that certain mileage, then you're gonna have suspension and undercarriage issues and things along that line. And not only that, that's a safety item for our guys on the street.
So my point for bringing it up is just to sort of anticipate possible questions and put the answers right out there. And this is a component, I think a critical component, and obviously critical budget that has history and has a lot of people who have really put time and effort on both the budgetary side and the police side to come up with something that's working.
So, the question I asked the other departments is, what can you do to save money? I'll leave it rhetorical at just this moment. Just so we're all aware of it, all of us. The increase in the wage part is 6.5%. That's what the budget says, and this is within guidelines as the FinCom describes them. It does not include, as Kelly pointed out wisely in the very beginning of this, any negotiations that we have, because we're not running under, we don't have a contract essentially as of the 1st of July, when we passed 1st of July. So that is something that would theoretically be added on top. If you'd like to answer the question now, but at least please think about what we would do if we need to reduce our budgets, because in spite of what a guideline might be, we may not be able to make it, certainly within even our tax levy. And it is a lot of money, and I know, you do a great job, there's no question about that. I'm delighted with the job you do. But I think we need to think very carefully about what we might do differently in the department if we have to get the dollars there.
I think we are very frugal over the last few years. I think you see our budgets, we try to make it as accurate as possible, and we usually come in under budget, fortunately. It's an unexpected business, unfortunately. We didn't anticipate this retirement, like it's gonna cost us money to the academy. We don't anticipate when we have officer injuries. There's no contingency monies in these budgets. It's designed that way, so we have to answer to the FinCom for any increases, which is fine with us, but,
Unexpected,
you know,
unexpected things.
Unexpected.
Go for
I mean,
reserve
so,
fund.
I line of work, fire, police, we don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know when we have disasters, we don't know when we have issues with storms, we have to call in extra personnel. And these are the areas that are uncertain throughout our budgets. I think we've managed them over the last few years considerably well, considering the issues that we've had with the weather and everything else. If you're looking for major cuts only come through personnel. That's what it comes down to.
Of course.
We would reduce our programs, we would reduce our SRO programs, the detective cuts. These are the cuts you have to do in order to maintain at least cars on the road. So if you want to call them supplemental duties that police officers do that are essential to our function with the community, I believe, and I think most of the officers on this department would agree that way, is that's what the people expect to have. If you want to reduce it, that's what we would do. But we would still have to maintain the personnel that are on the street answering the calls. The secondary, call them secondary issues that we would handle would be the areas that would be reduced. And of course, the elders would suffer, the schools would suffer. Our relationships with both of those organizations, I think, are extremely important for our department. And this would have to be really looked at very strongly if any reductions were going to be made.
And it's really a change in operations. I realize that, as you pointed out, personnel, whatever, but because we know where the other is, but the issue isn't the change of personnel, the issue is change in operations, which will affect the personnel.
Right.
And so you outlined a few of the things, but I think it would be important to keep that in mind over the next couple of months here, as we try to get our overall taxes into the line that we may have to, and we have to explain to the people, I mean, I don't like it, but we may have to explain to the people, we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna do that. But, and the reason is, it's this many dollars, and the reason is this is where our taxes are, and this is what we're trying to do. I'd ask you to keep those things that you were able to click off real fast, keep those set in front, right in front of us, and understand what those dollars might be, so we know what the options would be if we have.
We always work with the board and FinCom, whenever the ultimate, the board's authority dictates to us, we certainly will work with you closely to address it in the least damaging way, if necessary, for the citizens of this community. You know.
And as you can see, Mr. Gantner, even coming in tonight, we're bringing in another proposal where we're reducing some of the money that we're trying to, that was previously stated. So we're continually working on it, you know, and if we find anything, we'll bring it to light. But trust me, I've done a lot of research into it.
Thank you.
So they mentioned that a couple times, so next week when the first draft of the act, the full budget goes out, what you see will be a little bit different for the police department. They do have a revision that they want to put forth.
Which is the 3 reserve officers, the
A couple of
effect
things
of
that they
3
mentioned.
additional reserve officers. That's the change that we're gonna see.
Yeah,
They
like
mentioned a couple of
$9,300
things,
reduction.
Can I ask you a couple questions? Even though we're on a regular program, the cruisers appear as capital warrant articles rather than as expense items on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
And do I assume that 52,450 maintenance vehicle includes fuel? Where's the fuel cost in this?
Comes out of the highway.
Comes out of the
Highway.
highway department pays fuel
Yeah,
for
see,
all.
new guy, I learn something every day. The other thing is, I had one of the more vocal members of TaxWise, Topsfield, say that he felt there was no reason he could see that we couldn't reduce ourselves to 1 car on the road instead of 2 cars on the road.
Absolutely.
And I need to hear you say, for all of us,
Absolutely not.
what's the risk in that?
That's a huge, it's a huge officer safety risk. Nowadays, we're dealing with more things than it used to be before. And it only takes one person with a gun coming down Route 1 to change somebody's life. If I was put on the street with one person by myself, you would not see any activity from me. You would not. It's too dangerous of the society today.
I'm on the side where I
decided that
understand, but I just
years
wanted to get
ago.
that out.
Right, we did have that discussion.
We
years ago.
decided that years ago.
And I remember they were talking about reducing the midnight shift to
One
one
car.
officer. And that's a tragedy waiting to happen. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen for the town, and it's a liability issue. And it's a lawsuit waiting for our guys to bring forward.
And the other thing that this individual mentioned was, and then, quote, we wouldn't need anybody at night because we could get the state police to cover us. And I'm telling you what I've been told, and I'm carrying it forward as I said I would.
How many troopers do these people think are on a midnight shift? How many troopers do they think are
I
on
don't
vacation?
think there's enough
Two.
information out there, but
There's 2.
I want to be clear, this is the input that I'm hearing from
No, I
people
got
who
you.
are
I'm just
concerned.
trying to explain.
I don't understand how it would work, but I think it's worth asking it out loud here so that other members
The
can
staffing
understand this is.
issues with
these are the ideas.
Massachusetts State Police
Right.
are, in our minds, are a lot less than is necessary to perform their function on the road. They have a broader area of mileage and area, and the response time for an officer to respond, if there was an incident at Topfield based on their patrol area, would be considerable in time.
There's two troopers at any one time on the road.
Where's
They cover
where's the
from-
nearest barracks?
There's one in Danvers.
Danvers,
Oh,
And there's
opposite
one
the lady
in
hospital.
Kingsbury.
Yeah,
behind
okay.
Sapinos.
Yeah.
But there's,
Oh, that's right.
their coverage area is from Peabody all the way up through Lawrence, Methuen, Haverhill, that area.
Yep.
And their main patrol is like 495.
Yeah.
So to have them cover our town, that's a nice thought, but they're not gonna worry about Topsfield.
Well, they would laugh at you too, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah.
But I tied John's points relative to that, to my attempt at points about the cruiser.
Right.
And these critical issues, this is not, you know, we're not starting a police department from the ground here. And decades of experience, mostly with you guys and a little bit from the finance committee that have gone into these, but I think we need to get in front of these kind of core central issues and make sure that information that may be, real familiar to you, that you work with every day, it may not be as familiar with other
Yeah, a
people
lot of people
coming in
don't
for the first
understand.
time.
That's why I
The
asked the
other,
question.
the other
That's
thing
okay.
that you're gonna realize also is, and just to put it in layman's terms, the bad guys are gonna know what patrols are in what areas. And if you have a one-man patrol that's tied up on a call, they know it, and they're gonna come through here. It's plain and simple. You're gonna be
Unfortunately,
vulnerable.
we probably have people that worry about things like that and waiting for somewhere to attack.
Right, no,
That's why the date of the Christmas party is, kept so confidential.
What Christmas party?
That's good. I'm all set, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Well, hopefully I didn't do too bad for my first time.
No,
You,
great
you did all right, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, guys. Next item is the fire department. What?
Should we?
I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Do you
It doesn't
mind
matter.
taking this one out of order because
I'm worried about
the
it.
chief needs to stay for executive
Yeah.
session?
That's fine.
And maybe if we can do 2 quick budgets. Heidi and John are both here.
Yeah.
I think they're both within guidelines, so if we can keep it very short, we might be able to get back on track with our schedule. But that's just my suggestion to the chair.
I have no problem with that.
Because I know you have an abbreviated
Well,
schedule.
I gotta go, but,
You
I'm
have-
changing the order on this, so I
I'm
gotta.
sorry. Health should be next, I think, in your packet.
No, it's
After,
fire.
well,
It was fire.
fire,
It was fire.
health conservation.
Boy, could I just ask?
Yeah.
I understand that you're tied up. Would it be appropriate for us to schedule a meeting sometime next week like this to catch up with, because
I
you're not
don't-
here or whatever? I mean, it's up to us, but I mean, if we need the time to do it, we need the time to do it, so to speak.
I don't have a problem with that. I wanted to hear the police department. I don't have a problem with letting you guys take it from here. I wanted to hear the fire department, but hers is a balanced budget. And so I'm prepared to move on with it.
Okay.
Did anybody else feel the same way?
I'm not available next week.
Oh, okay, well, that answers that question.
It'd be Tuesday or Wednesday for me, that's it.
God, this is kind of screwed up.
Well, hold on, do you think that if we take up the fire department budget right now, that it will be a long protracted discussion, given that we just met with the police chief? That was my fear, is that if we have another long discussion, rather than having 2 quick
Yeah.
email, 2
Her
quick
budget
budgets,
sheet is pretty clean, so, you know, we're gonna
It's
be
really
able,
up to the board.
I can, yeah, I
This is a
would,
very small increase.
yeah.
She's not here, so hold on. I also know that the chief will also be here a little later for our executive session. That was the other reason why I suggested if
Let's
you
do
wanted
one
to
or
take
the
it out of order.
So the
Well,
time
John-
rush.
John
the
is
chief
on.
isn't here, so
You're on.
why don't we just
You're on, John.
let's let
Okay.
John talk about health or conservation.
I don't.
John's up here, John's at the
Better
town
get at
hall.
the table. Better get at the table.
both go at once.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I'm gonna tell you right off, you gotta control yourself, because we're not gonna sit here for 45 minutes and listen to you expound.
I haven't spoken yet at all.
Doesn't say a word.
I know, but I know
I'm
what
waiting
his,
for questions.
I know what his track record, I can't
Oh,
find the
track
budget.
BOH.
It was the
Yeah.
second
Keep
one
going.
down to.
512.
That as quick as we can.
512.
Sheet right after.
Just one at a
It's just a
time.
very simple.
I do have a question,
Yeah, there's
and
one
it's
page.
good for both of you to answer together. When I look at conservation, and I look at the Board of Health, I see there what apparently is a split in the additional cost of sharing a full-time
Yes.
administrator. 2 questions. that full-time cost is basically $6,300. And why is it not allocated evenly, and is that an accurate summary of the increase in cost combined?
There would be a small difference because the Board of Health meeting minutes are handled by the same person. And the Conservation Commission has somebody different.
Okay.
Not paid for out of this budget.
Right, it's paid for as a
Although
separate
ironically,
fund.
the conservation number's bigger in terms of,
That's,
Also
that's
previous
because John is at a higher level step,
yep,
so he's not receiving the same proportional increase as the other.
I see. So
Employees.
basically, it's a function of proportional increase in the
Correct.
official assignment of hours. I realize there
Correct.
can be some flexibility,
Mhm.
but the reality is you're allocating it this way.
Mhm.
And that the total increase is going to result in basically a $6,300, if I get the numbers right, $6,400 increase over the two part-times that were there before. Is that accurate?
Between the two of them.
I'm adding 2852 to 3581.
Yes.
Just want to be sure I understand.
While also factoring in the Board of Health and Secretary
Yep,
into the position.
okay. So that's part of it there.
Yes.
The rest of yours was all,
Excuse me, Dick,
met the
would
guideline.
you take one, pass it on this
You met the guideline and
time? This is just,
that's appropriate. I would ask you, any particular issues with trying to meet those line items with 0% increase?
we'll make it work. I'd like to emphasize what I just handed out to you, that Board of Health budget, 0.5% of the total town budget. When other departments are dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're dealing with tens of dollars.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we do what we do, and we have tools, we have processes, we know what we're doing, and we can keep the costs down. While we do have unexpected expenses, we do not have the size that police and fire will have. So, we've been able, traditionally, both conservation and health, to handle unexpected issues that have come up.
Small numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate that, and I will tell you that in my opinion, you do an outstanding job,
Thank you.
okay? And I'm looking forward to the same kind of work from Heidi that we've come to expect from you, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think one of the real benefits, and I appreciate that you captured it on this list which was passed out. One of the real benefits is now essentially, because there is a full-time administrator present, you essentially have a full-time departmental presence.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean each of you will be in the office, but I think in terms of service to the citizens of the town, when you look at the additional cost, which works for a lot of other reasons, that alone is a tremendous advantage for folks who may come in at time, if they know they can come in town hall hours and get their business done or at least initiated. I think that's hugely, a huge improvement, so.
It is, it's very important to the public when they come in, that they have somebody that they can go see and talk to.
That was not brought up and made as clear as it has become since, so I appreciate it
I
very much.
tried to synthesize the high points on this.
Yep, it was
Oh, it's
helpful.
excellent.
Good job.
And as we move in fiscal 19, as we move into the new town hall, or not new, but the renovated town hall, that'll be more apparent as well, because you'll have all of the three departments supported by two administrative staff as opposed to, 3 part-time administrators.
You know, I think for reasons we've discussed in the past, it's a wise idea.
Yeah, very important.
Another reason why we've been able to maintain a good level of services is that while we access grants but any department can do that. We have access to